When a young punk mocks an elderly veteran in a small-town diner, he thinks he's untouchable. But a Navy SEAL spots the veteran's tattoo, and what happens next leaves the whole room speechless. I'm Harlan Jefferson Tate, 73 years old, and I've seen enough of this world to know it don't always repay kindness with kindness. But that don't stop me from trying. Never has. Never will. That afternoon in Crestwood, Missouri, as the sun dipped low over Juniper Hollow Road, I sat in my usual booth at the Iron Skillet, a diner that's been here longer than most folks care to remember. The place smells like burnt coffee and bacon grease, with chipped countertops and booths that creak when you shift. It ain't fancy, but it's honest. A slice of America where folks still nod at strangers and leave tips in crumpled bills. My hands, rough as old leather, rested on the table, the left one trembling just enough to remind me of that shrapnel wound from '68. Vietnam don't let you forget, even when you want to. My denim jacket was slung over the booth, and my white shirt was rolled up past the elbows, showing the tattoo on my right forearm, a crossed rifle and anchor, the mark of Marine Force Recon. Faded now, like me, but still there, a quiet witness to a life I don't talk about much. I was sipping my coffee, black, no sugar, when I overheard the family at the counter. The woman, Marla Kincaid, was fretting over her wallet, counting coins like they were gold. Her kids, Toby and Lena, maybe 8 and 10, stared at the menu with eyes bigger than their stomachs. I knew that look, seen it on my own kids' faces back when Doreen and I were scraping by. Marla's voice was low, but I caught the strain. "We'll split a plate, okay, babies? Mama's got you." Something in my chest twisted. I ain't rich, but I had enough for a day like this. I caught the waitress, Kaylee Burrows, a girl with tired eyes and a kind smile, and slipped her a 20. "Cover their meal," I said, keeping my voice low. "Don't tell 'em it's me." Kaylee nodded, understanding without needing words. When she told Marla, the woman's face lit up like Christmas morning. She scanned the diner, her eyes landing on me. I gave a small nod, just enough to let her know. Her lips formed a silent thank you, and the kids dove into their pancakes like they hadn't eaten in days. That was enough for me. A man don't need applause to know he's done right, but the world's got a way of turning good deeds sour. At the counter, 3 young fellas, Bryce Dalton, Nate Carver, and Jody Hensley, were holding court like they owned the place. Bryce, the loudest, was a big guy, broad shoulders, buzz cut, with a smirk that said he thought he was untouchable. They'd been knocking back beers, their voices carrying over the clatter of plates. I'd noticed Bryce eyeing me when I walked in, but I paid it no mind. Folks like him always got something to prove, and I ain't here to play their games. Then Bryce's voice cut through the diner like a knife. "Yo, Kaylee, what's with the old guy? You think he's some kind of hero, paying for people's food?" His tone was mocking, sharp enough to turn heads. I kept my eyes on my coffee, stirring it slow, but my jaw tightened. I've heard worse. Lord knows I have. But it don't make it easier. Kaylee, wiping down the counter, shot him a look. "Leave it, Bryce. He's just being decent." "Decent?" Bryce snorted, loud enough for the whole place to hear. "Man's probably just flexing. Bet he's got nothing else going on. Look at him, sitting there like he's king of Crestwood." The diner went quiet, folks glancing my way, then looking down quick. Marla's smile faded, her hand tightening on Lena's shoulder. Toby stopped eating, his fork hovering. I could feel the weight of their stares, but I didn't move. Ain't no sense giving a fool like Bryce the satisfaction. Still, his words stung, like salt in an old wound. I thought of Doreen, gone 5 years now, who'd always said, "Harlan, you rise above. They can't touch your soul." Easier said than done, love. Bryce wasn't done. He leaned back, his stool creaking, and raised his voice. "What's your deal, old man? You think you're some kind of saint, or are you just lonely, trying to buy friends?" Nate and Jody cackled, slapping the counter. A trucker at the far end shifted, but he didn't speak up. An elderly couple in the next booth whispered to each other, their faces tight. Kaylee muttered, "Bryce, enough," but her voice was too soft to carry weight. I could have let it slide. Lord knows I've walked away from worse. But something in me stirred. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet resolve. I ain't fought 2 tours in Vietnam to let some loudmouth run me down in my own town. I looked up, meeting Bryce's eyes. I ain't looking for trouble, young man, I said, my voice steady, with that southern drawl I never quite lost. Just having my coffee. Young man, Bryce mocked, his smirk growing. Don't patronize me, Grandpa. You're sitting there acting all high and mighty. But you're just some washed-up nobody. Bet you never did nothing worth a damn. The words hit like a punch, though I didn't flinch. I thought of the jungles, the gunfire, the men I'd carried out on my back. I thought of the Purple Heart I never showed nobody, the bronze star gathering dust in a drawer. I thought of the tattoo on my arm, a mark of blood and brotherhood Bryce wouldn't understand in 100 lifetimes. My left hand shook harder, and I set my mug down to hide it. Inside, I was wrestling. Stand up or stay put, speak or let it pass. Doreen's voice was fainter now, drowned out by the pulse in my ears. Marla stood, her voice trembling but fierce. You ought to be ashamed talking to him like that. He paid for our meal, didn't ask for nothing. What's your problem? Bryce turned his sneer on her. Mind your own, lady. This ain't your fight. Go back to your kids. That's enough, Kaylee snapped, slamming her rag on the counter. Her face was red, but before she could say more, the door swung open with a jingle. A young man stepped in, maybe 30, lean and muscled, with a buzz cut and boots that thudded on the linoleum. His gray t-shirt hugged his frame, and his eyes, sharp, blue like a hawk's, scanned the room. His name was Travis Leland Boone, though I didn't know it then. A Navy SEAL, on leave, just stopping by for a burger. But the tension in the air stopped him cold. His gaze landed on Bryce, then on me, and lingered on my tattoo. Something in his face shifted. Recognition? Maybe respect. I didn't know it, but he'd seen that insignia before, on men who'd walked through hell and lived to tell it. Bryce, oblivious, kept going. What's that ink, old man? Some cheap tattoo you got at a fair? Trying to play Marine or something? I felt a spark of heat in my chest, but I held it down. My tattoo wasn't for show. It was for the men who didn't come back. For the nights I still woke up sweating. I could have told him that, but words are cheap to men like Bryce. I stayed quiet, my eyes on my coffee. Travis took a step forward, his jaw tight. You got a problem with him? He said, his voice low, like a warning shot. The diner froze. Every eye on him now. Bryce blinked, caught off guard, but his smirk didn't fade. Who are you? Bryce said, standing now, his chest puffed out. This ain't your business, pretty boy. Travis didn't budge. I'm making it my business. You're running your mouth at a man who don't deserve it. Back off. I looked at Travis, seeing the steel in his stance, the kind you only get from training, from facing down worse than a loudmouth in a diner. I didn't know him, but I knew his kind. Brothers in arms, even if we'd never met. I spoke up, my voice calm but firm. Son, I appreciate you, but I got this. Travis glanced at me, his eyes holding respect, but he shook his head. No disrespect, sir, but I ain't leaving you to handle this alone. Bryce laughed, but it was hollow. Sir? Oh, that's rich. You two in on this together? Planning to scam the place or what? The accusation was so dumb it almost made me chuckle. Almost. Instead, I leaned back, my eyes on Bryce. Boy, I said, my voice slow. You got a lot of mouth for someone who ain't got a clue. Keep pushing, and you'll learn something you don't want to know. The diner was a powder keg now, and I could feel the spark coming. Kaylee was on the phone, probably calling Carl Dempsey, the owner. Marla was whispering to her kids, her face pale. The trucker at the counter gripped his mug tighter. And Travis, well, he looked ready to end this one way or another. I didn't want to fight, not here, not now. But I wasn't running either. I'd stood my ground in worse places than this, and I'd do it again if I had to. I'm Harlan Jefferson Tate, and I've learned one thing in my 73 years. Trouble don't always announce itself with a bang. Sometimes it creeps in, quiet as a shadow, and before you know it, you're neck-deep in a mess you didn't ask for. That evening in the iron skillet, with the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry bees and the smell of fried onions hanging heavy, trouble wasn't just creeping, it was strutting. Bryce Dalton and his two shadows, Nate Carver and Jody Hensley, had turned my quiet act of kindness into their personal stage, and I was the unwilling star. The diner was a pressure cooker now, the air thick with eyes and whispers. Marla Kincaid stood by her kids, Toby and Lena, her hands protective on their shoulders, her face a storm of worry and defiance. Kaylee Burrows, the waitress who'd seen too many shifts to be rattled easy, was gripping the counter like it was her lifeline, and Travis Leland Boone, the young SEAL who'd walked in at just the right moment, stood between me and Bryce, his posture calm but coiled, like a spring ready to snap. My coffee was cold, my left hand trembling from that old shrapnel wound, but I kept my eyes steady. I'd faced worse than this. Jungles, bullets, men who meant to kill me. But that didn't make this sting any less. Bryce, all swagger and sneers, leaned forward on his stool, his voice slicing through the diner's hush. "What's the matter, old man? You gone mute? Or you just too scared to talk back?" His buddies, Nate and Jody, laughed like it was the funniest thing they'd heard all week, their beers sloshing as they slapped the counter. Bryce's eyes gleamed, feeding off the attention, like a man who'd never learned the difference between being loud and being strong. I stirred my coffee, slow and deliberate, though my insides were churning. I thought of my old unit, the boys in Force Recon who'd trusted me to lead them through hell. I thought of the nights I'd lain awake, hearing their screams in my dreams, and I thought of Doreen, my wife, gone 5 years now, who'd always said, "Harlan, you don't owe nobody an explanation. Your life speaks for itself." But here, in this greasy diner on Juniper Hollow Road, with every eye on me, it felt like my life was being weighed and found wanting. Kaylee stepped out from behind the counter, her apron stained with ketchup and coffee. "Bryce, I'm telling you, knock it off," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "You're making a damn fool of yourself." "Fool?" Bryce laughed, a harsh bark that made the elderly couple in the next booth flinch. "I'm just calling it like I see it. This guy's acting like some big shot paying for people's food. Probably just wants attention." Nate chimed in, his voice slurred from too many beers. "Yeah, man, that tattoo's probably fake. Drew it on with a marker to impress folks." Jody snickered, cracking his knuckles like he was auditioning for a bad movie. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept it locked down. My tattoo, crossed rifle and anchor, inked in '66, wasn't for show. It was for the men who didn't come home, for the missions I'd never talk about, not even to my kids. I could have told them that, could have thrown my Purple Heart in their faces. But what's the point? Men like Bryce don't hear what they don't want to. Instead, I leaned back, my voice low but clear. "You boys sure got a lot to say for folks who don't know a damn thing." Bryce's smirk faltered, but he recovered quick. "Oh, listen to that! Grandpa's got a mouth after all! What's next? You gonna tell us you were some war hero? Spare me!" Marla, who'd been quiet till now, stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. "You're pathetic!" she snapped, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "This man paid for my kid's dinner out of the goodness of his heart. What have you ever done for anybody?" Bryce turned his sneer on her, his eyes narrowing. "Stay out of this, lady. You and your brats ain't part of it." "Watch your mouth," I said, my voice sharper now, the kind I used to use when dressing down a rookie who'd stepped out of line. "You talk to her like that again, and you'll wish you hadn't." The diner went dead silent. The trucker at the counter froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. The teenage girl in the corner put down her phone, her eyes wide. Even Kaylee stopped moving, her rag dangling in her hand. Bryce blinked, caught off guard by the steel in my tone, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "You threatening me, old man?" he said, sliding off his stool, his boots hitting the floor with a thud that echoed like a drumbeat. I didn't move, didn't blink. "Ain't a threat, son. Just a fact. You're picking a fight you don't understand." Jody, quieter but no less trouble, stood up, his chair scraping the linoleum. "Maybe we should help the old guy out," he said, his voice low and mean. "Show him the door, you know?" Nate followed, cracking his neck like he thought it made him look tough. "Yeah, let's make this quick," Marla gasped, pulling Toby and Lena closer. "You lay a hand on him, and I swear I'll call the cops right now," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. Lena, the younger one, started to cry softly, and Toby's small fists clenched, his eyes darting between me and Bryce. I felt the old fire flare up, the kind that kept me alive in Vietnam, when the jungle was dark and the enemy was close. But I wasn't 20 anymore, and this wasn't a battlefield. Still, I wasn't about to let these boys scare me out of my own damn diner. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on Bryce. "You think you're tough? Pushing around an old man and a mother with kids? Boy, you ain't seen tough. You wouldn't last a day in the places I've been." Bryce laughed, but it was forced, his eyes flickering with doubt. "Big talk for someone who can barely hold a coffee mug steady." That hit low. My trembling hand, a sore spot I didn't like, poked. I set the mug down, slow and careful, and gave him a look that had made stronger men back off. "Keep talking, son. You're digging a hole you can't climb out of." Travis Boone, who'd been quiet till now, stepped forward, his boots heavy on the floor. His eyes were locked on Bryce, and there was a calm in him that wasn't peace. It was the kind of calm you see in a man who knows exactly what he's capable of. "You heard him," Travis said, his voice low, like a warning shot across a bow. "Back off, now." Bryce sized him up, his smirk returning but shakier. "Who the hell are you, huh? This ain't your fight, pretty boy." Travis didn't flinch. "Name's Travis, and I'm making it my fight. You're harassing a man who's done more for this country than you'll ever understand. Step back or we're gonna have a problem." I looked at Travis, seeing the fire in his eyes. The kind that comes from training, from carrying the weight of lives on your shoulders. I didn't know him, but I knew his kind. Men who'd seen combat, who understood loyalty. Our eyes met, and for a moment it was like looking at my younger self all those years ago before the world wore me down. I nodded just once, letting him know I saw him. "Son," I said to Travis, my voice softer now, "I appreciate you stepping in, but I've handled worse than this." Travis shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "With respect, sir, I ain't leaving you to deal with these fools alone." Bryce's face reddened, his bravado cracking like cheap glass. "Sir? Oh, that's a joke? You two are pathetic, acting like you're in some damn movie." I couldn't help it. A dry chuckle slipped out. "Boy, if this was a movie, you'd be the one nobody roots for, the loudmouth who don't know when to quit." The line got a nervous laugh from the trucker, and even Kaylee cracked a smile, though she was already on the phone, her voice low and urgent. "Carl, you gotta get down here. It's bad." Carl Dempsey, the diner's owner, was a big man, burly with a graying beard, and he didn't take kindly to trouble in his place. I knew he'd come running, but I wasn't sure it'd be soon enough. Bryce was pacing now, his buddies egging him on, their voices a low hum of menace. The diner felt smaller, the walls closing in, every eye on us. I thought of my old CO, Captain Reynolds, who'd told me once, "Harlan, you don't win by being the loudest. You win by being the last one standing." I'd stood my ground in worse places than this, but the weight of it, the public humiliation, the kids watching, Marla's fear, it was heavy. Marla spoke up again, her voice shaking but resolute. "You're all talk, Bryce. You think you're tough, but you're just a bully picking on someone who's worth 10 of you." Bryce rounded on her, his finger jabbing the air. "I told you to stay out of this. You don't know me." "That's enough!" Kaylee shouted, slamming her rag down so hard a glass tipped over, spilling water across the counter. The sound snapped the tension like a twig, and for a moment everyone froze. Then the door burst open, and Carl Dempsey stormed in, his face red as a beet, his work boots stomping the floor. "What in the name of God is going on here?" he roared, his voice filling the diner like a thunderclap. He took one look at the scene. Bryce looming near my booth, Nate and Jody behind him, Travis standing like a guard dog, Marla shielding her kids, and his eyes narrowed to slits. Kaylee pointed at Bryce, her voice steady now. "They're harassing Mr. Tate, Carl. Been at it for 10 minutes, and it's getting ugly." Carl turned to me, his tone softening, but his eyes still blazing. "Harlan, you all right?" I nodded, though my chest was tight. "I'm fine, Carl. Just trying to enjoy my coffee." Carl's jaw clenched, and he turned to Bryce. "Dalton, you got 10 seconds to explain why you're causing trouble in my diner." Bryce shrugged, playing innocent, but his voice was shaky. "Just talking, Carl. Old man's acting like he's better than us, that's all." I snorted, low and dry. "Better than you? Son, that bar's so low I'd trip over it." A few patrons chuckled, but Carl wasn't laughing. He stepped closer to Bryce, his bulk filling the space. "You, Nate, Jody, out, now! And don't come back till you learn how to act like men." Bryce scoffed, but his eyes darted to the door. "You serious? You're taking his side over us?" "I said out," Carl growled, "or I call the cops and we'll see how tough you are then." Nate tugged at Bryce's arm, muttering, "Come on, man, let's go." Jody hesitated, then followed. Bryce shot me one last glare, then slammed the door so hard the glass rattled. The diner let out a collective breath, like we'd all been holding it too long. Carl turned to me, his face softer now. "Harlan, I'm sorry. This ain't right, not in my place." I waved it off, though the weight of it lingered. "Appreciate it, Carl. Ain't your fault some folks got no manners." Travis, still standing nearby, looked at me, his eyes searching. "Sir, that tattoo. Force Recon, right?" I glanced at my arm, then at him. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. "Not yet." "I'm Travis," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "If those boys come back, you let me know." I studied him, seeing the man he was, young, strong, but carrying a weight I recognized. "Appreciate it, Travis," I said, "but I've been fighting my own battles a long time." He smiled, just a little. "I don't doubt it, sir." The diner settled, but the air still felt heavy, like a storm that hadn't quite passed. Marla hugged her kids, whispering thanks to me again. Kaylee comped my coffee, insisting it was on the house. But as I sat there, my hand still, my heart wasn't. I'd faced down worse than Bryce Dalton, but this wasn't just about me. It was about every time I'd been looked over, written off, called less than what I am. And something told me this wasn't over. I'm Harlan Jefferson Tate, 73 years old, and I've learned that life don't always hand you justice on a silver platter. Sometimes it comes slow, piece by piece, built on the backs of those who've stood in the fire with you. The morning after that mess in the iron skillet, I was back in my usual booth, the one by the window where the light spills in just right. The diner smelled of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon, the kind of comfort that settles your bones after a rough night. The linoleum was scuffed, the red vinyl booths creaked, and the jukebox in the corner hummed an old Merle Haggard tune. My hands, one steady, one trembling from that damn shrapnel wound, cradled a steaming mug. My denim jacket hung over the seat, my tattoo, a crossed rifle and anchor from my Force Recon days, barely visible under my rolled-up sleeve. Last night's ugliness lingered like a bad taste. Bryce Dalton and his pals, Nate Carver and Jody Hensley, had turned my simple act of paying for Marla Kincaid's kids' meal into a public shaming. I'd faced worse: Vietnam's jungles, the sneers of folks who didn't like my skin color, the quiet dismissal of a world that forgets its veterans. But that didn't make it easier. Not when Marla's kids, Toby and Lena, had to hear it. Not when Kaylee Burrows, the waitress with a heart bigger than her paycheck, had to play referee. Not when Travis Leland Boone, a young Navy SEAL who'd stepped in like a brother I didn't know I had, saw the tattoo and knew it meant something. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me. Marla had stopped by earlier with her kids, dropping off a card covered in crayon hearts and wobbly letters that read, "Thank you, Mr. Harlan." I'd tucked it into my jacket pocket, next to the faded photo of Doreen I always carried. Her voice was in my head now. "Harlan, you don't need to fight every battle. Sometimes you just stand tall and let the world catch up. Easier said than done, love, when the world keeps swinging." The diner was quieter this morning, just a few regulars scattered about. A retired teacher, Mrs. Evelyn Pritchard, read the Crestwood Gazette at a corner table, her glasses slipping down her nose. A delivery driver, Reggie Holt, shoveled eggs at the counter, his cap pulled low. Kaylee moved between tables, her smile warm but strained, like she was still carrying last night's weight. I couldn't blame her. Crestwood's a small town, and word travels faster than a brush fire. By now, half the folks on Juniper Hollow Road probably knew about the scene Bryce caused. What I didn't know was that the story had reached the VFW post on Oak Ridge Lane, where old soldiers like me swap stories over cheap coffee. Roland Buck Navarro, a retired gunnery sergeant who'd been my friend since we traded war stories at a veterans picnic in '85, got wind of it from his cousin, a skillet regular. Buck's a big man, built like a tank, with a voice that could wake the dead. When he heard what Bryce did, he was spitting mad. "Nobody disrespects Harlan Tate," he'd said, rallying a few others from the post. I didn't know it yet, but they were already on their way. Across town, at the Crestwood Fuel Depot garage, Bryce was spinning a different tale. Leaning against a toolbox, his wrench idle, he bragged to his coworkers about how he'd put that old man in his place. Nate and Jody nodded along, but their laughs were nervous. Being banned from the Iron Skillet wasn't just a blow to their egos. Carl Dempsey's word carried weight, and the threat of cops wasn't empty. Still, Bryce's pride was a stubborn thing, and he wasn't about to admit he'd crossed a line. Back at the diner, the door jingled, and Travis Boone walked in, his boots heavy on the floor. His gray t-shirt clung to his frame, and his blue eyes scanned the room with that quiet intensity I'd seen in young Marines, the ones who'd learned early that vigilance keeps you alive. He'd stayed at his aunt's place on Persimmon Ridge Drive last night, but I could tell he hadn't slept much. Something about my tattoo had stuck with him. Force Recon, a badge of missions most folks only see in movies. He spotted me and nodded, a gesture that said more than words. "Mind if I sit, sir?" he asked, his voice low, respectful. I gestured to the seat across from me. "Free country, son. Take a load off." Travis slid into the booth, his posture straight, but not stiff. "I couldn't stop thinking about last night," he said, his eyes on my tattoo. "That insignia. Force Recon, Marine Corps. I'm a SEAL, on leave. I've trained with guys who talked about men like you. Legends. Mind if I ask about it?" I chuckled, dry as dust. "Legends, huh? Son, I'm just an old man trying to drink his coffee in peace. Served 66 to 68. Did my job same as you." Travis leaned forward, his voice earnest. "With respect, sir, Force Recon in 68 wasn't just a job. Tet Offensive, K-San. Men like you held the line. That ain't something you just shrug off." I looked at him, seeing the hunger for connection, the kind that binds those who've seen war. My mind flashed to the jungle, the heat, the screams of my boys. I pushed it down, sipping my coffee. "You do what you gotta do, son. Some days, it's just about getting home." Before he could press, the door swung open with a force that rattled the glass. Buck Navarro stormed in, his VFW vest bristling with pins, his face a thundercloud. Behind him came three others. Delphine Ramsey, a wiry former Army nurse with gray braids who'd patched up soldiers in Desert Storm. Quentin Lyle, a Gulf War tank commander with a limp and a sharp gaze. And Sylvia Torrance, a Navy corpsman from my Vietnam days, her eyes soft but fierce. They weren't just veterans. They were family, the kind forged in blood and time. Buck spotted me and marched over, his voice booming. "Harlan, you all right, brother? I heard what happened last night, and I damn near lost my mind." I raised a hand, trying to calm the storm. "I'm fine, Buck. Just a few loudmouths. Ain't worth your blood pressure." Buck's eyes blazed. "Ain't about my blood pressure, man. It's about respect. You're a damn hero, Harlan. Those punks don't know who they're messing with." Travis stood, offering his seat to Buck. "Travis Boone, sir. Navy SEAL. I was here when it went down." Buck sized him up, then nodded, a grudging respect in his eyes. "Good to meet you, son. Thanks for having Harlan's back." Delphine stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Harlan, you should have called us. I'd have been here in a heartbeat, giving those boys a piece of my mind." Sylvia, quieter but no less fierce, added, "You don't deserve that, Harlan. Not after everything you've given." I looked at them, my throat tight. "Y'all are making a fuss over nothing. I just wanted my damn pancakes." Quentin chuckled, but his eyes were serious. "Your family, Harlan. We don't stand by when family gets disrespected." The diner's patrons were watching now, their breakfasts forgotten. Mrs. Pritchard lowered her newspaper, her eyes misty. Reggie, the driver, gave a slow nod like he understood. Kaylee, wiping a table nearby, smiled, her hands trembling. Carl Dempsey emerged from the kitchen, his apron streaked with grease. "What's this, a VFW convention?" he joked, but his tone softened when he saw me. "Harlan, coffee's on me today. Sorry about last night." I nodded, uncomfortable with the spotlight. "Appreciate it, Carl. Ain't your fault." The air shifted when the door jingled again, and Bryce Dalton walked in, alone. His swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous shuffle. His eyes darted from me to the veterans to Travis, and I saw the moment he realized he'd walked into a lion's den. He headed for the counter, avoiding my booth. "Kaylee, just a coffee to go," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Buck's head snapped up, his voice a low growl. "That him, Harlan? The loudmouth?" I didn't answer, just held Bryce's gaze. Travis stepped forward, his stance easy but ready. "Got something to say, Bryce? Or you just here for coffee?" Bryce's face flushed, his hands fidgeting. "I ain't looking for trouble. Just leave me be." Delphine crossed her arms, her voice cutting. "You owe Mr. Tate an apology, young man, and you better mean it." Buck stood, his chair scraping loud enough to make Bryce flinch. "You think you can waltz in here after what you did? You got no idea who you're messing with." Sylvia's eyes narrowed. Men like Harlan carried this country on their backs. "You don't get to spit on that." The diner was silent, every eye on Bryce. Kaylee, behind the counter, said, "Just do it, Bryce. You were wrong." I watched him, seeing the war in his eyes. Pride against shame. I didn't need his apology. Not really. I'd faced worse and walked away. But this wasn't just about me. It was about Marla's kids, about Kaylee's trembling hands, about every time someone like Bryce thought they could tear down someone like me and walk away clean. Bryce swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. "Look, man, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that stuff." I studied him, long and hard. "Apology accepted," I said, my voice steady. "But words don't fix what's broken, son. You gotta live better than that." The words landed heavy, and Bryce's shoulders slumped. He grabbed his coffee and slipped out, the door closing softly behind him. The diner erupted in quiet applause. Not loud, but real. Mrs. Pritchard clapped softly, her eyes shining. Reggie raised his mug in salute. Kaylee wiped her face, her smile breaking through. Buck clapped me on the shoulder, his grin wide. "That's how it's done, brother." Travis looked at me, his eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect, pure and simple. "Mr. Tate, if you're ever up for sharing those stories, I'd be honored to listen." I smiled, a real one. The kind that feels like coming home. "Maybe one day, son." The veterans lingered, promising to check in later. I finished my coffee, left a tip for Kaylee, and stepped out into the Crestwood morning. The sun was climbing, painting Juniper Hollow Road in gold. I didn't need a medal or a parade. I'd won something better. The quiet nod of those who understood the weight of a wrong set right. And as I walked my head high, I felt Doreen's voice again, soft as a breeze. You did good, Harlan. You did good.